And what's up? Welcome in Monday episode GC Live. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark. Plenty to get to as South Carolina recruiting rolls along. The commitment of Kam Pringle over the weekend. Of course, that coming on Sunday. You had an Elijah Caldwell official visit. Of course, the news dropping a little bit earlier today, or at least becoming official. I think most fans had put two and two together on Eddie Lewis, the Memphis wide receiver, ultimately ending up at South Carolina. That news became official with him joining the program. Junior Day over the weekend just never really stops as far as Gamecock recruiting goes, so plenty to get to. But before we do, we're going to tell you about Clint.Hammond, who is our presenting sponsor here and good friend. He's not only a supporter of the show, but a huge supporter of Gamecock Athletics. clint.hammond.com. 803-771-6933. Clint is now, of course, as we've told you, part of Movement Mortgage. That team you used to hear about here on the show used to be at Mortgage Network. Entire team is now with Movement Mortgage. So same great team, just a different name and logo. If you're in the market for a new home or you just want to see what interest rates are and see what type of home you can afford, again, give Clint a shout, 803-771-6933. He's helped me. He can do the same for you. Chris, I assume we can't start anywhere other than with the big man, Kam Pringle, making it official, committing to South Carolina on Sunday afternoon. This had been anticipated. There's a little Twitter buzz maybe about some other schools last week that I think was just sort of building up the announcement a little bit. But I think this had been trending this way for a little bit. You know, maybe early on, Florida being, I think, admittedly his childhood favorite. Maybe they were a factor. It felt like there was a stretch of this recruitment where he seemed intrigued by Tennessee, in my opinion. You have the two-time defending national champ in Georgia and Kirby Smart himself coming to 2A Woodland to check in on Kam Pringle. You had some big boys involved. I don't want to misrepresent it that this has been South Carolina the whole way. I don't think it was that much of a lock, but it also has felt like the Gamecocks have been in good position. They've had him on campus multiple times. I mean, I've lost count. He's another one of these in-staters. We've seen this movie before, an in-stater who just is on campus all the time. That was the case with Kam, and he verbally commits to South Carolina during a ceremony at his high school on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, and the point you made was interesting about kind of you listed off a bunch of other schools, right, from the Southeast, and then you had some others, even, Ohio State and some other kind of more national or schools that are not in this geographic region, not in the Carolinas, not Florida, not Georgia, not Tennessee, that also offered Pringle and would love to have had him as well, right? All those kind of rotated in and out, or they were a factor at one point or another. And there were some points in this recruitment, West, where you would hear, hey, South Carolina's main competition may be this school, or maybe now it's this school. But the common denominator, the consistent factor, was that South Carolina was always there. And I think it's hard to kind of exactly pinpoint, West, unless you have a better answer than I do. Maybe you do, about just when South Carolina's lead really took hold here. I think it was pretty early. I think the staff just did a really good job with him consistently ever since Shane Beamer arrived and prioritized this kid. I think South Carolina, there may have been some ebbs and flows in terms of the competition level, but they were always there. It was consistently South Carolina at the top of his list in sole position or at the top of the list, kind of in a lead grouping. And I know when he committed yesterday, there was no surprise to it. There was no real drama to it. Behind the scenes, this is basically what we've been expecting for quite some time now.
Yeah, no doubt. I was trying to think back too on the timeline. This stuff runs together at some point, y'all. And sometimes in a case like this, when you're that highly recruited, it's not even really that the ultimate decision is like swaying back and forth. It's maybe, South Carolina has staying power, is the favorite, but then maybe a guy takes a visit somewhere else and just really likes it. So there's a stretch, you start to hear some buzz, hey, this team is really pushing hard. Maybe even for a stretch, the kid himself might be thinking, hey, that's where I'm going to go. I don't remember when that little Tennessee buzz was, but it felt like somewhere along the way they did at least have his attention. He was asked, not specifically, it was one of those questions where he wasn't asked open-ended, but it was brought up how important it was for him to sort of get over there during camp in the summer and actually see how the coaches work on the field. And that was mentioned as a big factor in all this. I think you have a situation here as well. We talked about this on the 107.5 show, Chris. As highly recruited as he has been, as long as he's been on these radars for these schools, I don't see schools stopping. However, you never say never, but this does not feel like the kid who you're going to be constantly worried about if you're a South Carolina coach. Who else is he talking to? Where is he going to go? He's not the kid that's going to just magically visit 5 schools a month from now and be like, oh, I'm committed, but I'm open. Just doesn't really fit him. And I think as early as it is, Chris, that of course will give some Gamecock fans pause. Like, okay, there's a full like almost year until he will sign. However, there was no pressure on him to go ahead and commit now. I don't think by anyone. And there was certainly no pressure from his coaching staff there at Woodland. I don't think any of these programs, coaches were pressuring him. So that sort of, if you want to look at it a little bit just from a logical standpoint, that leads me to believe that he felt pretty comfortable that he was ready to make his decision, and also added in that his mom is a big Gamecock fan. So yesterday was her birthday, and that was part of the reason he chose that day to do it.
Yeah, great point that, he didn't feel pressure to do it and didn't rush into it. Sometimes you see a guy make an early commitment and you can just kind of see it coming a mile away that, okay, this is just however you want to classify it. It's a reservation, or this is just really kickstarting this kid's recruitment, right? Like a lot of us that cover recruiting, we kind of have these jokes about particularly guys in the state of Florida, like their first commitment to like Miami or Florida or FSU, that really just kind of signifies the start of their recruitment, right? This is a lot different really from that. I mean, Pringle has been recruited for a long time. He's been a lot of places. He's taught with a lot of coaches. And really, I mean, look back to when his recruitment started. I know I mentioned this previously, talked about it some on the 107.5 show today. This is a kid that hit the radar really December 2020. So he hits the radar December 2020. By the time the following spring rolls around, I was actually reading one of Wes's old stories on Kam Pringle yesterday. March 2021, I think he had 5 Power 5 offers. He had South Carolina, Georgia, Arizona State, a couple others. So this is a kid that's been recruited for a long time. His process got going early. And so this isn't someone that got a bunch of offers and just said, I'm going to commit somewhere just for the heck of it. I think you look at how he's operated, look back at his commitment ceremony. If you missed it, check it out. How he structured that, the people around him. You talk to people that are familiar with him as a kid. He's one to make more measured decisions. So even though, yes, this is an early commitment, Wes, I think for him, for somebody who has gone through recruiting for so long, it's actually a very thoughtful decision. And it was just, for him, it was just time. Yes, it lined up, as you said, with his mom's birthday, but he was legitimately ready to make this decision and felt at peace with it, I think.
Yeah, like you said, he's been through the process for a long time. So I got a sense as well that just being able to now shut down some of the calls, the texts, the DMs, everything that goes into being a highly rated prospect, highly regarded dude, the fact that you hit the radar just so early. Not even all highly rated guys are on the radar that quickly, that early, that young. And luckily he was mature. One of these guys is mature beyond his years. So he was young. He was mature enough at his young age when it all started hitting that he handled it extremely well, went through the process, and, found his school, it appears. And he was even asked, like, are you going to take other visits? And he was just like, as long as nothing changes with South Carolina as far as the relationships and it was basically like, as long as there aren't like major coaching changes, is what I read into it. As long as they don't just stop talking to me. I didn't even take it as like they have to keep recruiting me. It was just like, you've seen in the past where guys just get dropped by schools, which not that would ever happen with Kam Pringle, but his point was, as long as everything stays the same with them, everything's going to stay the same with me. And, so I think Georgia will keep pushing. I think Tennessee will probably keep pushing, maybe Florida as well, but it's going to take a ton to even get him to listen from what it sounds like. Let's dive a bit, and we already knocked out about 15 minutes of the show, and we haven't hit on even anything else. But let's dive into him as a player, Chris. Depending on where you look, again, one thing I love about On3 is that you have the various ways you can compare the different rankings right there on the profile. And industry comparison has him everything from the number 1 offensive tackle in the country, which is what both the consensus and ESPN actually have him as, all the way up. The worst, if you could say it that way, is number 9. Yeah, number 9 offensive tackle in the country. So I think On3 itself has him as the number 2, but they actually are even a little bit higher on him as far as the overall ranking in the country. So I'll pull up the film here in a second, Chris, but what's your initial thought on Pringle as a prospect?
Well, so you look at the listed height and weight, 6'8", 340. And Wes, I know you gave some thoughts on this earlier today, that at this point, probably not as big as 340. And even if you don't give him 6'8" and you say he's more 6'6", 6'7", point is, this is a big dude, right? So that's number 1. But don't get too hung up on size, because what you want to see in an offensive lineman is, can he move? Is he flexible? Can he bend? Can he run out in the open field? Can he move his feet and pass protection and for run blocking? Able to do all the techniques that you need to do to be a top flight lineman. And so you look at him, and yes, he's impressive when he walks through the door, but then you turn on the film and you see that, okay, this is a big guy that can really, really move. And I think that's a trait that gives him, those traits rather, give him a really, really high upside. Because, yeah, he looks great getting off the bus, and he will at South Carolina. But then you dive into the actual physical tools, and this is an athletic guy for his size. This isn't just a big, lumbering, sloppy, for lack of a better term, offensive lineman.
Yeah, and trying to get to the tape here for y'all, I think he's probably a true tackle. Like, there was a little bit of chatter at one point of, could he possibly be a guard? I think he's a tackle all the way. Looking at him yesterday, seeing the body type. Here, let me get this film for y'all. Struggle to do 2 things at once, I'll tell you all that. But all right, there it is. This is junior film from Cam, and I think he's a true right tackle ultimately, from what I've heard. I mean, still brings some physicality to the position, and is one of these guys, if you talk to him, he is very laid back, very mature, not really, a man of a bunch of words, not necessarily shy either, but just sort of laid back, I would say. You see him on the field, and this is one thing their coaches were telling me, is that he's just one of those guys that flips a switch when the whistle blows. He plays offense, he plays defense, does a little bit of everything there, plays basketball, which I think has been very good for his dexterity and, certainly for his athleticism and cardio, and has dropped some poundage, I think, probably since that 340 number was put out there. And Chris, I actually would love to go watch him play basketball. I think that would be quite entertaining to watch some of these 2A schools maybe try to bang with him inside at 6'7", 300 plus. But, you sort of look at how they've started to rebuild this O-line, man. I mean, Lonnie Teasley taking over as the full-time O-line coach, he's going to have some young guys to work with in the next few years that are all incredibly highly rated and highly recruited.
Yeah, USC's done a really good job, just to kind of go big picture, on the offensive line lately. You look at the class they brought in this year, couple transfers, right? One in Nick Gargiulo from Yale that I think has a chance to be an immediate impact guy, maybe even a starting center. Then you look at Sidney Flugar, who's got some traits from Western Illinois. You look at, Jatavius Shivers out of Georgia. And then other than that, a trio of 4-star guys, right? Tree Babalade, Marquis Anderson, Trovon Ball, all different body types and different skill sets. And then you look at, obviously, Pringle being a great start to 2024. South Carolina has a chance, Wes, to sweep the top 3 possibly offensive linemen in the state. They're in really good position to do so with at least 2 of them, in Pringle and Josiah Thompson from Dillon. So you look at kind of the star power. Sure, that's nice on paper, but then just the body types, the traits, some of the recruiting battles that they're winning too, Wes. I mean, you get Marquis Anderson out of Dorman. You pull Trovon Ball, who had a nice offer list, kind of quietly. You pull him from Atlanta and get him committed early, in the process. Tree obviously had a nice offer list, was a highly ranked guy. So, Pringle's a national level recruit. So I think a lot of people, Teasley included, I think this is really helpful to their recruiting efforts that Teasley, moved from the analyst position where he was already building relationships with these kids to the on-field O-line coach. Then Greg Adkins, who was the O-line coach and has, of course, built these relationships over the course of some years since he's been at South Carolina, is also still involved with the program. Then a lot of other people, support staffers, who deserve a lot of credit for what they've done on the offensive line too. So just big picture, yeah, they're starting to stack some nice young talent. 23 class was really strong. 24 has a chance to be so as well.
Yeah, I think it's been a team effort as far as O-line recruiting, but that only continues. It's just essentially, and they said they haven't really, I guess, named Greg Adkins' new position, but essentially, he swapped places with Lonnie Teasley as far as how it would look from a recruit's perspective. And, I think that what they've done just sort of continues from there. Those 2 guys, Sam Survey, always doing a great job. Taylor Edwards heavily involved as well. So, I think these guys have really just teamed up to recruit the last 2 classes. You look moving forward, Josiah Thompson out there, Blake Franks out there. Clint asking, do I see Josiah Thompson as a left tackle? That's just my opinion, Clint. If they get them both, I think Josiah maybe ends up being the left tackle. Joey's saying Cam's going to be the blindside tackle. I mean, you got to see how it plays out, right? Like, I'm just giving one man's opinion in that I think Cam maybe becomes more of the right tackle, Josiah potentially the left tackle. But we'll see. We'll see how these guys develop, what size they are, how they match up when they get into college. It's really a long way off because it could end up either way. But, I mean, Chris, you talk about the potential of adding Josiah Thompson, and don't look now, but it sure feels to me like they are making a move for Blake Franks. It was all but, I don't want to say it was all but decided he was going to Clemson, but it sure felt like he was going to Clemson. And the thing is, he has kept allowing South Carolina opportunities to recruit him. He was on campus at the end of the last calendar year. He was back on campus for junior day on Saturday. I got a little bit of feedback from him for Gamecock Central. Just the questions he was asking, going into detail about, his major, what that would look like at South Carolina, felt to me like somebody who isn't just going through the process. Felt to me like somebody who is really listening and paying attention and is going to make an informed decision. So I don't want to say – I wouldn't put Blake Franks quite in the Cam or Josiah category as far as being like a lean that I would feel really strongly about. However, it sure feels like South Carolina has a greater chance with him now than they did, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. This one's very, very close. And really, from where I'm sitting right here, Wes, you probably agree, I could see this one going either way. And I think it has kind of possibly even swung back and forth based on last visit. And that's to say nothing of Frank's like waffling or not being able to make a decision. I think it's just tough for him between these 2 in-state programs. Clemson's, I know academics, the engineering program in particular has been cited as something that he really likes. South Carolina, I think the staff has done a really, really good job from a relationship standpoint. All the people that we mentioned in the past, right? Off the field, Serbay, Taylor Edwards, Lonnie Teasley, Greg Atkins, Beamer. I mean, they've done a really, really good job with him. And so I thought it was really interesting, Wes, that it was kind of a point of emphasis. And it was this for a lot of the recruits. A lot of the recruits that we've talked to from this weekend talked about how they got a closer look at the educational aspect of South Carolina. That was clearly something that they harped on this time. But I think that was an area where they needed to go with Franks to kind of show him a little bit more on that. So really interesting that they did that and that he cited that to you as something that stood out about this trip. Seems close. We'll see where it goes. You all, I know it got mentioned here in the comments on YouTube that, you know, Frank's talking back and forth a little bit with Kam Pringle yesterday, little camaraderie there. So it'll be interesting to see where this one goes.
Well, and you're talking about someone who wants to decide in February. Kind of felt like that might not happen if he's just not ready. You know, I think to sort of match it up with what we were talking about with Cam, I think he was ready to do it. With Blake, it's maybe, you know, if he's not ready, he's not ready. So it'll be interesting to see, does he keep that February timeline? He told me he didn't have a date necessarily locked in right now, February, but could easily change. So we'll see what happens there. But either way, Carolina situating themselves in a good spot with obviously already landing Pringle. I think they're in a great spot with Josiah Thompson. He was on campus over the weekend. Again, another guy that's probably taken 20 plus visits, it seems like, to South Carolina. That may not even be an exaggeration. And then trying to get Blake Franks as well. A couple of other out-of-state guys coming in, a new offer out at O-line. And so that class for 2024, the O-line class, already starting to take shape, you would certainly say. We got to talk a bit about 2024 big picture. Some guys coming up, some guys about to commit. But Chris, we get news. Before we get to that, we get news earlier today about Eddie Lewis officially being a part of the team. This is something that was a little bit sort of just quiet for a minute there, I would say. You go back, he was one of the welcome homes, but now that is official, on campus, part of the program, part of the team, and I think an instant impact guy for South Carolina.
Yeah, in more ways than one. And so, you know, I do think South Carolina is going to continue looking not only to the high school ranks, because Elijah Caldwell in the 2023 class is out there, Wes. We could see more portal activity once the portal reopens on May 1st through May 15th. After spring football across the country, we might see another little wave of portal transfers in and out. And so South Carolina, I think their staff will keep their eyes peeled there, but they needed one immediately, you know, in this cycle, somebody who could come in, go through spring practice. And that's what Lewis brings. And I said more ways than one, because you think about Wes back to last year and Josh Vann and the role he played. Ended up being more of a complimentary receiver to Juice Wells last season, but nonetheless was an
All right, I think we lost Chris. I didn't know if that was on my end or on Chris's end, but we'll try to get him back here shortly. It's probably him messaging me right now. He said he's trying to get back in. But yes, Eddie Lewis, a addition to South Carolina's team, now officially at wide receiver. 1 year to play, so you're talking about somebody who's going to not be a long-term guy on this team, but certainly when you look at them wanting to add additional help to the receiving core, Lewis, someone that they hope can do just that. And my understanding is that the expectation is he can be a guy who can help them right away. Could play inside at slot, could play outside. Actually, I think you look at the size, you probably think more along the lines of slot. And then you sort of look at what he did at Memphis, played on the outside a lot. and made a lot of plays there, made a lot of plays down the field. So, I think for him at South Carolina, they really love those versatile guys, the guys that can play multiple positions on offense, play multiple receiver spots specifically. And, I think as someone that if you look at South Carolina moving forward, that need at receiver was something that we had pinpointed and something that certainly, Chris, you can't hear? Huh. We can see you. I guess Chris just can't hear me. Hopefully the rest of you can still hear me. I need everybody in the chat. Tune in. Let us know that you can definitely hear me still. I imagine you'd all be yelling at me if you couldn't hear me. But so Lewis, so I get back on topic. Lewis, someone that I think can help South Carolina as a punt returner, can help them in multiple ways as Carolina tries to put together this offense. And everybody's saying, yes, you can hear. Yeah, appreciate y'all. Hey, so if it's just me, y'all throw some questions in here and don't leave me talking to myself. Y'all throw some questions and I'll hit them in the final part of the show. But with Lewis, we knew they wanted help at receiver. And I think that for him, he's someone that I again can help in multiple ways, and we'll see certainly how South Carolina wants to use him. But all right, y'all. The other thing we're going to talk about is these 2024s coming up that are going to be making their announcements, and y'all hold tight real quick. We're trying to get Chris. I don't know what this thing is doing now. I've never seen that logo in my life. Y'all hang tight. We're trying to get Chris back. Joey wants to know if there's word on Elijah Caldwell from Northwestern. Yes, he did make it in for his official visit over the weekend, and from what I have heard, it went very, very well. I would probably say he's a huge lean to South Carolina, and I think we got Chris back. Can you hear me now?
We went haywire on that one. Got just completely kicked out. Couldn't hear you when we came back. We don't know what happened.
Yeah, I was like stuttering. I was stuttering over my words over here, man, because I was sitting here. I was trying to talk and sound coherent, and then I was looking, and it was popping up these logos I've never seen, and
yeah,
it was
weird.
I
think we got hit with an EMP, one of our enemies or something.
Yeah, probably. Good grief. Troy said, "Is Lewis Ace Sanders?" No, I mean, I'm not going to put that on him, Troy. I mean,
that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's definitely some recency bias here. He actually does remind me of Josh Vann, like from a skill set standpoint. Like I know you were talking about Josh Vann in terms of them needing a guy to replace him as punt returner, but I think look at Josh as a player. Josh had very good hands. Like I know he went through that stretch where he had a case of the drops. And if you just had never watched him before, you might not agree with me saying that. But Josh actually has phenomenal hands. And Josh is like not the biggest guy, but not Ace Sanders. He's not tiny. And he's not blazing. He's not the guy you say, oh, that's a blazer, track speed.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not slow by any means. He carved out routes pretty well. Could play inside, could play outside. Was a punt returner who managed to make plays in that part of the game. Really, like I think that might be an appropriate comparison if fans are wondering what type of player from a skill set standpoint. Even his PFF grades as a punt returner and as a receiver are similar to what Josh's were at South Carolina.
Yeah, and you basically just completely said what I was going to say before the EMP struck us. In that, you kind of need that Vann replacement. Like you need a complimentary receiver And you're looking around going, who's going to return punts? Because while South Carolina didn't make huge plays, it seems like some of the big ones they did make got called back a couple different times or a few different times, Wes. But by the way, Wes is still with us right now. He did not get hit by an EMP, I don't think. He'll be back. I do think you're kind of thinking through that and going, okay, well, who is it? Is it Marion Brown? Is it somebody else? Josh Vann brought sure hands to that punt return position as well, and that's valuable. And so when you look at Lewis, he was a guy, he's returned a punt for a touchdown in his career, but otherwise he seemed very reliable there. And so I think that's really fair to kind of expect, hey, if he can replace that type of production, that'd be really good, in my opinion, for South Carolina. So you're bringing in a guy that has some experience, a similar skill set, can play some receiver, be a complementary piece, and potentially Wes be your starting punt returner. It looked like Memphis played him a lot in the slot, would have him run slot fades and different routes there. So a guy that showed good hands. The little bit of film that I did round up, I haven't watched a whole bunch of Memphis games, admittedly, but did look up a little bit on him and kind of came away thinking that he'd be a solid complementary piece, potential starter, in this receiver rotation.
Yeah, there's not a lot out there on him, honestly, as far as just finding highlights. But yeah, he did play some slot. According to PFF, he played more outside for them, which kind of surprised
me. See, I think the highlights I saw, I'm like, this guy's all in the slot. Maybe that's his best spot.
His plays, but
we'll see.
I think that with him, they'll just use him wherever he's really needed. I think you obviously you bring back AB and to carry on in the slot. You have Leggett back on the outside, as far as guys that have done it, in addition to Juice, of course. But I'm more thinking about who's going to complement Juice in this offense. You're going to have some good, I would say, good competition among those guys. And like you said, man, they're going to keep adding guys, I think, if they can find the right ones. I think they're in great shape with Elijah Caldwell at the high school ranks. And then, if the right guy comes along, be it portal, JUCO, whatever, if the right guy comes along, I think they could continue to add at that position if it is from a difference-making type player. Tell you what, Chris, give us your thoughts on Michael Smith real quick.
Yeah, really like this guy. Good size, 6'4", 225 pounds. Kind of recruiting look back. South Carolina, his first offer, I believe, definitely first Power 5 offer. That was when Eric Kimry was on staff as a tight ends coach. So they jumped in on this kid very, very early in the process and kind of have continued that through when Jody Wright was hired at South Carolina, continued that relationship. Just a really good athlete. Like, you look at him, he kind of looks like a bigger wide receiver. You turn on the film, he looks like a bigger wide receiver. This is someone that can leap, that can make the acrobatic catches, that can run. And so just in terms of his size, his frame, his ball skills, man, this is a pass catching tight end. So amassed a really nice offer list. Arkansas has been in the final 3. Ohio State's been in the final 3. South Carolina's been in the final 3, and seems to be a really high comfort level with Smith and the Gamecock football staff so far leading up.
Yeah, Smith making his decision. 12:05, which is a random time.
Very specific.
Based on a school bell or something?
That's what I'm thinking. That's a good thought.
Or he just knows recruiting announcements, other than Lenore Sellers, are always late.
Yeah. Now Kam Pringle, it was running a little bit late, but it was like once it got going, boom. So we've had 2 in a row that have been nice and tidy once they started.
Yeah, once they started. Now I think Cam was waiting on a family member to get there before they started. But Lenore is the most on time, fast.
That was crazy.
Just over.
It was over in about 1 minute.
I've ever seen. But yeah, so Michael Smith, 12:05, and I'll just go ahead and tell y'all full disclosure. So the reason I quickly just was like, Chris, talk about Michael Smith. Also, the family dog is in the office right now, and my office is the room over the garage. So there's like stairs. And if I don't block off the stairs, he will go try to like go down them. And he's not big enough to go down them. So I had to go make sure the dog wasn't about to go rolling down the stairs. And then me have to hear about it being my fault that he has 3 broken legs. So that's what was happening there. That's why I just was like, all right, Chris, you got to talk about something. But it was valuable because Michael Smith is deciding tomorrow, Tuesday, 12:05. We'll have complete Gamecock Central coverage of that as well, much like we did with Kam Pringle. And I want to talk a bit about Wendell Gregory here in a second. But first, we're going to tell you about our friends at Liberty Tax, 803-462-5576. It is tax time officially. It is here. You can cure your taxiety with our friends at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia by letting them handle your taxes. Fast, accurate, guaranteed, all the things you want to hear about doing your taxes. They're also locally owned and operated. They're staffed by tax professionals. They are open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays. They also have multiple service options. You can start through the app. You can start on the desktop portal, or you can just walk in and do it in person, old school. Whatever way works best for you, our friends at Liberty Tax will take care of you. 803-462-5576. Chris, Wendell Gregory. Man, this would be a start for the Gamecocks. How good is this kid? We were talking about on 107.5. Everybody has him as a 4-star. But there's some distance in how high On3 is on him versus maybe some of the other services. As high as the number 4 linebacker in the country, which if you're a 4-star player, you're a good player. Like, you're a really good player. But if you're the number 4 linebacker in the country, that's a completely different sentence, in my opinion. So you're really talking about actually being on borderline of being in that 5-star conversation. I'll, be curious. Obviously, South Carolina's got to get him on Friday. But if they can, you're talking about, as we talked about earlier, back-to-back classes of landing, true 4-star guys with him and Pup Howard.
Yeah, so, I mean, Wendell Gregory is planning on making a decision, an announcement on Friday, the 27th, which is also his birthday. And so, Wes, if they can land, got Dante Reno in the boat, 4-star quarterback, Kam Pringle in the boat, 4-star offensive lineman. If they can land Smith, who's also a 4-star, and Gregory, that's, 4 4-stars to begin your 2024 class, and all, I think, top 200, top 225 players. And then there's some variance in that, right? Michael Smith's top 150. Gregory, as you said, on 3, its own internal rankings has him very, very high. And so it would be, stacking him and Pup Howard in the 23 and 24 classes would be great. But just in terms of the 2024 class overall, what a start that would be. And this is a kid that, plays a position that I know Gamecock fans have been clamoring for, more talent. And so you got that with Pup Howard in the 23 class. You could potentially get it here with Wendell Gregory in the 24 class and have him back to back. And this is the type of guy that, he has NFL, I think, type measurables and potential. West looks really like a will linebacker to me. 6'3", 6'4", 205, 210. Has the athleticism to get out and play coverage in space, but also as a pass rusher type. And I think has the size and the physicality as he continues to get bigger to play the run well as too. So a lot to like, to go back to the tried and true phrase about Wendell Gregory. And Siri also trying to weigh in on Wendell Gregory there. Sorry about that.
What did she say?
She was just repeating what I said. She's copycat.
She said a lot to like, probably.
A plagiarist. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so what do you look for when you say a guy's probably a Will versus a Mike? From what you've seen just here at South Carolina too, specifically in this scheme, what do you think maybe makes a good Will versus being a fit for that Mike spot?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I've even thought about that. It's like, why do I say that? Like I don't know if you ever think about things like that. It's like, what makes this position versus that position? I think for me, I kind of thinking about some of the traits of other people that they've played there, right? So, like for instance, you think of Brad Johnson, and Brad's a really interesting. Like that's not really your prototypical will linebacker because he was a D end in high school and he started his career as a buck or an edge position in Will Muschamp's scheme at South Carolina, and then moved out to the will linebacker position last year in 2021. But one thing that he was really good at was rushing the passer. When they would send him on those blitzes or delayed blitzes when the running back would stay in. But I think like at the will position in general from South Carolina, like a guy who's got some length, who can cover tight ends, who can go out and cover backs out of the flat in the backfield, who has some pass rushing ability, but also is big and physical enough to hold up in the box against the run. And I mean, there's probably some carryover in the traits, of a Mike linebacker too, a Mike versus a Will. I know you've said, Wes, that sometimes they can kind of be interchangeable. We've seen guys at South Carolina, including in this scheme, who have experience playing both. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about. It might be in some cases, it might be like your more athletic option out there at the will spot. But I think it just depends. But those are some of the things that I look at.
Well, I think it's like anything. If you just have two absolute stud linebackers that are better than everybody else you have, you probably find a way to get them both on the field. Like I don't look at it like there's enough difference between the two that it won't allow me to get my two best on the field. But also, I'm sure there are skill set things, and if you, as with anything, there's like, all right, in a perfect world, what does this guy look like versus, maybe you play a guy at a spot and you say, well, we got to maybe not make these calls as much with him to protect him in certain situations. In his case, though, I mean, he's carrying receivers down the field, making plays 40 yards from the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's not something you necessarily see a ton of from linebackers. And, I think, Chris, you look at linebackers these days, a lot of times these guys are hard to find because high schools just put them on the edge and say, go get the quarterback. Like if you're linebacker size for like the SEC, a lot of high schools are just saying, go play defensive end or like a stand-up outside linebacker where it's really not a space playing position. It's just, hey, go get the quarterback. So when you find a guy who's got some size to him that can diagnose plays, that can stop the run, but also can carry receivers down the seam that far, those guys aren't exactly easy to find.
Yeah, and they do. I mean, you see him doing a lot of different things on film. One of them is playing on the edge as a stand-up type guy. A great, to your point, Wes, about how high schools like to employ guys like Gregory in a lot of cases. I mean, look at Jerron Willis, who they got from Ole Miss. He played some safety earlier in his career, but he was a guy that played on the edge, go get the quarterback. And so they use Gregory here at Walton like that in some cases, but he's also a guy who can play more of a true linebacker spot, be an asset on special teams. But yeah, I think he just brings a lot of upside. He's probably not as like ready-made of a player as a Pup Howard is. Like Pup Howard, just very not only physically advanced, but just football advanced, just kind of a tackling machine. But like you look at Gregory's traits, I mean, he is a good player. You can see a productive player, but the traits here, as far as the length, the athleticism, you can just kind of tell there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of potential here. And I think that's something that could excite Gamecock fans.
Yeah, Walton High in Marietta.
Yep, that's right.
So Carolina got Case and Henry out of Walton. Weren't there some guys during the Spurrier era that either they landed or they were highly involved in? For some reason, G.A. Mangus recruited Walton.
He did, and he's a Walton alum, I believe.
Maybe that's where
there was also
connecting all those together.
There was also the running back whose name is escaping me, frustratingly, that had originally gone to Alabama that South Carolina had a strong look at. And his name is just totally escaping me right now. But he was also, unless I'm mixing him up, I'm pretty sure he was also a Walton guy.
Was his name Bo something?
It was not. Pretty sure it was not Bo.
I don't know. I just
think a Bo
random
Scarborough.
guess.
Bo Scarborough reference.
No, I don't know for some reason. I know who you're talking about, but I'm not placing the name.
Well, unfortunately now I'm going to have to go and look it up because it's going to bother me for the remainder of the day. Yeah.
Well, we'll let Chris Google that. Football industry comparison commitments, which is a short way of saying the On3 consensus team rankings, has South Carolina currently 8th in the country for 2024. Again, it is so early, y'all. Like, it is very, very, very early. But I wonder what the most number of 4 stars South Carolina has ever started a class with. Because as of right now, if they have the week I think they will have, then they're going to have 4 commits and 4 4-stars to start this class. And they're going to be the favorites, I would say, for several others already. Now, they're going to have to keep the momentum. It is hard to – you got to sign a lot of good players to be a top 10 class in the end. But as far as the start goes, without even knowing the math, I don't get this deep into it, man. You got to think 4 4-stars to start the class is going to bump them up to top 5.
Yeah, I would think so. And it's all about how you finish, but like the momentum is very real for this class. By the way, Wes, that running back, Tyron Jones, you remember that name? So I was trying to think of.
Not bad.
Top 10 class. So let's give a little reference point. So 2023, right, which is not completely done. We still have the February signing period coming up on February 1st, first Wednesday, February. So number 10 this year is Tennessee. They landed 11 4-stars and 1 5-star. That was good enough for 10th. Now they're right ahead, actually, of Clemson, who had a 5-star and 16 4-stars, right? So then you start going into the different levels of 4-stars. I think Tennessee signed the number 1 player in the country who's a 5-star plus, so I think that helps your ranking. You look at LSU, they're number 5. 1 5-star, 18 4-stars. So the bare minimum is you're probably going to need 15 4-stars, something like that. Maybe a 5-star sprinkled in there somewhere to get into that top 10. So still a tall order. But I mean, look, when you got 4 commitments and they're all 4-stars, if that's how South Carolina comes out by the weekend, that is, as you said, one heck of a start.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at how it would compare to the teams ahead of them, Chris. Florida had now again, it's not just like number of 4-stars, the actual rating and the average rating, all that's going to play into this as well. But Florida is currently 6th in the country right now, and they have 3 total commits, all 4-stars. Louisville has a 5-star commit and a 4-star commit, but 2 total commits. So they have a very high average right now. They're 5th in the country. Notre Dame currently has 7 commits to start their class, 6 4-stars, 1 3-star. Ohio State has a 5-star and 2 4-stars. Georgia has 7 4-stars to start their class and 1 3-star. So really, you're gonna be splitting hairs, and it's gonna come down to basically the average rating among those guys as far as where South Carolina would be. Again, like Chris said, it doesn't really matter right now, but it is fun to talk about. And it could give you some momentum, like he said. I think recruits pay attention to this stuff maybe more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So it is something to keep an eye on for us as well. All right, we got about, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes. What have we not hit, Chris?
Oh, let's see. All right. Previewed a couple upcoming commitments. Kam Pringle. We talked about Eddie Lewis, or you did, really, when I got zapped. Yeah, I think we've covered most of the breaking quote unquote developments. We've been so busy, man. We haven't been able to hop on the old GC Live as much as we probably would want to. I know one thing is Junior Day, right? So that's probably gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit. So South Carolina had a Junior Day on Saturday, and they had a lot of kids on campus. Coaching staff back out on the road this week. Shane Beamer, his assistant coaches, they're out. Mostly visiting high schools of 2024, 2025 prospects, really canvassing a lot of their recruiting area based on where they've been west during the contact period. You'd see Pete Limbo up in New York and Philly, and coaches down in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, the Carolinas, all over the place. But we're going to continue rolling out. I know we had some returns from the weekend, Wes, from the Junior Day event, but a lot of really talented players that were on campus. Did you pick up anything, I don't know, really substantial from the weekend in terms of big moves for guys? I know. You talked about Blake Franks. He was on campus, but there are a lot of others as well.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at. I think that's what caught my attention is Blake Franks. That I think they've just made a move there. It's kind of a combination of, not that I even y'all put a ton of stock into recruiting interviews anymore, but it's a vibe. It's combined with some stuff I've heard here and there, and just the actions there as well.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like a guy who's locked in to going to Clemson, which is what it seemed like was maybe the case, at one point. I did talk to several other guys. I'm trying to think, Chris, of who it just felt like they made a move with. Talked a little bit with Amari Jefferson, who is at Baylor School, which is where Eric Kimry is at now. Felt like they have his attention a little bit. I think Georgia has his attention as well, it sounds like. I'll tell you, an intriguing guy is this Mike Williams, who is from Flowers High School. I know you spoke to him briefly, Chris. South Carolina just offered him over the weekend. They obviously now have some connections there. I would assume the process is sort of just getting underway with him, but you think Carolina has his attention early on?
Yeah, I think so. That was an interesting new offer. And, of course, from the same high school that produced Desmond Umeozulu, right, from the 2023 class. And not only Mike Williams, West, but another one I wanted to bring up, Braden Lee, who we've not talked to personally, but Braden Lee is a very highly ranked defensive back from that same program, Flowers High in Maryland. And a teammate, obviously, of Desmond this past year. Those two guys are pretty close. And you want to talk about a highly ranked guy. Braden Lee right now, top 100 in the On3 consensus. On3, even a little bit individually higher on a number 88 in the country, the number 10 corner in the country, number 2 in the state of Maryland. Obviously, USC doing some good things in Maryland. Early for Braden Lee, but I heard this weekend's visit went very, very well. He was joined by his family. South Carolina also the early leader in the On3 recruiting prediction machine, the RPM. They've overtaken the lead over Maryland, Ohio State, West Virginia, and some others for Braden Lee. So that's one to definitely keep an eye on too. Obviously, Dylan Stewart, West, up in D.C. South Carolina has been named as the leader several times there. There's a bunch of kids. We can do an entire show, I know, on Junior Day, and we still have more returns still yet to gather.
Yeah. By the way, as we were doing the show, interesting news. Peyton Argent, kicker/punter from Hoover, announcing his commitment to South Carolina. PWO deal there, but obviously someone that Pete Limbo has really, you would assume, I would say, focused in on. Like I know Limbo, a guy who is very thorough in these evaluations, and I believe Argent was among the guys that was expected in this past weekend. Is that right, Chris? The lists are running together. Was it this past weekend or the weekend before? I'm pretty sure Argent was in this past weekend, the weekend that just finished, and then announced his commitment to South Carolina. Cole's Kicking, which I would say is like the premier kicking company and website that does rankings, they have him as the number 17 kicker in his class, 6'2", 195. Again, class of 2023 prospect. We'll try to get in touch with Peyton. I don't know much about him other than just what I've read online right now.
Yeah, and Pete Limbo, I remember a conversation I had with him at one of the media events, and this was not long after he got there, and kind of just asked him the philosophy on scholarshiping kickers and punters, specialists versus not. And obviously now South Carolina West has, their two starters, and Kai Kroger and Mitch Jeter were brought to South Carolina originally as scholarship guys right off the bat. Hunter Rogers, their snapper, was placed on scholarship. And so you see a lot of different iterations of this. Parker White was a guy that originally walked on, earned a scholarship, earned his way. And Limbo just kind of said, hey, you can do either way. He definitely minds the potential preferred walk-on route because you can a lot of times find guys and bring them in. And even if you got a kicker, Wes, he's kind of explaining this, a kicker or a punter that you think has immense physical tools and is great at the high school level, you never quite know how they're going to react, when they get to college. And so obviously we've seen the two guys that I mentioned, Kroger and Jeter, whether or not they were scholarship guys or not at the beginning, they've proven, that they can do it, that they can handle those things. And so you see this a lot in college ball in terms of guys being preferred walk-ons and ended up, earning their way and becoming the guys. So we'll try to continue learning more about this new edition.
Yeah, Garrett asking about him being a 5-star. Yeah, not traditional 5-star. It's so like Cole's Kicking. There's another kicking service. I can't think of what it's called.
There's Chris Saylor.
Yeah.
And there's like one more.
Yeah.
Yep.
But they are kicker and punter only rankings, right? So it's not a 5-star in that you're going to look him up on On3 and he's going to have a 5-star by his name and he's going to affect the rankings like a 5-star guy. Again, Cole's, I already closed it out, but Cole's had him number 17 and a 5-star guy. So it's a nice thing for that kid, and it's a nice thing among the kicker rankings, but it's not the equivalent of being a 5-star in like traditional rankings. So anyway, we'll continue to gather information on him. Again, complete coverage of Michael Smith, commitment tomorrow. Of course, you got Wendell Gregory on Friday, and we're just going to keep rolling along, y'all. Appreciate the support. As always, lots going on. We're going to have as many GC Lives as we can fit in there as well. We still have the 107.5 show. Tune in for that, 11 to noon every single day. And now actually more Gamecock Central than ever on 107.5 at 9 o'clock. 2 days a week, you're going to have Kendall Smith. 3 days a week, you're going to have Colin Taylor as well. Colin has had his debut show this morning, and Kendall will have her debut show tomorrow. So congrats to them. Until we see you again, appreciate it. Y'all have a good one. He's Chris. I'm Wes. We'll talk to you then.